You ever write out a plot or you put plot points together, and when you look at your plot, it kind of just feels like they're just random events strung together? Or you watch a movie and you think, this is just random stuff thrown together? Today, I'm going to be talking about how to direct your plot points so they make sense together. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. So if you're someone who is putting together a story, and you're especially putting together a plot, and maybe you've written part of the story, you might get to a point where you just feel like things aren't hanging together really well within your plot or within your story or whatever you want to say it. And you might be at the end of your rope. And if you're at the end of your rope, I'm here to actually show you or tell you, I guess, the way you can walk yourself through your plot so things actually make sense within your story and so that it doesn't feel disjointed. How do you break out of this limbo of having your plot points just seemingly stuck together randomly? Because when I go through a story, what happens usually, and you probably do this as well to a certain extent, is what happens is I come up with a whole bunch of different ideas I want to put into my story, right? I have all these ideas. I actually fill up notebook page upon notebook page. And then what I do is I narrow them down to the things I want. And then after I narrow them down to the things I want, I start to put them in the order I want to see them in, right? Or I want to put them in an order that makes sense to me. Well, the first thing I would do if you are writing a book is to actually limit your ideas. And I am not a good idea limiter in general. I like having a lot of different ideas. But at the same time, if you do limit your ideas, it's going to feel like everything hangs together better within the book. What I would suggest, actually, if you have all these different ideas, I would actually suggest that if you have a whole bunch of ideas, you built a world, that you actually write multiple books within that world, whether they're a series or they're one-offs, because then you can use those ideas and then they don't get lost when you're actually putting them into your story, or they don't feel like there's a million different ideas in your story. And I'm sure I have been guilty of this in the past, and you can feel free to tell me if you read any of my books how I'm guilty, and I'm serious. You can tell me how I'm guilty. But the first thing I would do is you want to limit what you're dealing with. You want to actually simplify what you're dealing with. And that's actually a bit of a trick because it's hard to pick what the best thing is if you don't actually know what you're writing first. And what I would actually suggest to you is that you write your basic plot line of the book before you start taking all those ideas and plugging them into your book. And it's very easy to write the basic plot line of your book. I actually have an episode on that, so I'll put that episode up here if you're watching this, I guess on YouTube, and then if you're not watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this, it'll be in the description of the thing below as well. So check that out if you want to have a very basic idea of how you make an outline. But when you are coming up with all those ideas, if you have that outline, it's going to help limit you. It's going to help you see what is going to work in your story and what is not. And then you can get rid of or push to the side those things that aren't going to work in your story. And then you can take those ideas that are going to work into your story, and then you're going to be able to plug them into your story better. Okay, so that's one of the biggest things I would say you should do if you want to limit what you're doing. I would say that's one of the biggest things you need to do if you're going to make things make sense, is to actually have it simplified. Simplify what you're doing, limit your ideas so that you can streamline those ideas, because you might have 100,000 pages to write, but 100,000 pages actually isn't that many words. It isn't actually that much space to write something in. It actually flies by quite quickly, especially if you have a lot of different ideas to put into that story. And if you're one of those people who have 500,000 words in your story, maybe you want to trim some of that. I'll just say that right now. One of the other things I would say to do is to walk yourself logically through your story. This is something I do as well when I'm in my outlining phase. I guess you can do it at other points when you're writing, but I do this in my outlining phase when I'm trying to figure out the basic plot line of the story. And then I do something like this when I'm writing as well. And I'll tell you that in a bit. But when I'm in my outlining phase, I get to, I know what I want to happen, right? I know what I want to happen in the story. Maybe I want it to start with a fight, and it depends on what type of fight it is. But what I'm going to do is I have this basic idea, and then I'm like, well, I want this and this and this and this to happen in my story as well. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push my character logically toward that other idea within my story, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the possibilities of what can happen based on that initial scene in my story. So let's just say I start the story out with a fist fight, right? Well, there are a lot of different things that can happen based on that fist fight. The main character can lose if the main character is taking place in the fist fight. The main character can win. The main character can have a Pyrrhic victory, or a Pyrrhic victory, I believe that's how you say it, where they win, but it's practically the case that they've lost because they've gotten so beat up. There's a lot of things you can do with this. The main character might not even be involved in that fight as well. Like I said, there's a lot of things you can do with this. A main character might get a scar that plays into the story later on. The main character might get a medal. The main character might get a lot of different things. The main character might win a house from the person. Or if they're barbaric, they might take all the person's things, steal their women, etc. There's tons of different things you can do with this. And it depends on your world. It depends on who the main character is. It depends on who the other character they're interacting with is as well, right? But what you're going to do is you have this first plot point and you have another plot point up ahead. And you have a gap between those two plot points. And you're going to look at all those different possibilities. And for each scene in your story, there are going to be a lot of different possibilities. There's probably more possibilities that than you can actually figure out, just because you're a limited human being and you can't think of everything. But you're going to pick the one that gets you closer to that direction, right? The most interesting one that gets you closer to that next piece within your story. And then you're going to wind your way through that whole entire story in that way. There's this action that happens, and there's a reaction that happens that is in turn an action that creates another reaction that is in turn an action that creates another reaction. So you have this chain of things that happens. And every single time you're moving through your story, you're trying to figure out the possibilities, the directions that your character can go. And when you're figuring out the directions your character can go, you're picking the best one and you're moving in that direction. And I can't give you the specifics of what that best one is because every story is different. And this is where experimentation comes in with writing. You need to experiment with your writing. You need to try things out. You might need to try ideas out in your head before you actually get down to writing itself. This is why I think you should outline your book. But you do that so that things don't just feel like they're disjointed or things don't just feel like you're moving from one thing to the other, right? Within the writing itself, I do this as well, right? So I try to, and this is a lot more organic and it's a lot harder to explain, so I'll do my best to try to explain it right here. But what I do in my writing is I shift my character toward my end goal very slowly. And I do it very slowly. I want to make that very specific, and I want to make a point to say I do it very slowly because a lot of people, I think, try to push their character toward the end goal of the story or the end goal of the scene. We can make it even smaller, or the end goal of the paragraph or the conversation. They do it in a way that it's too fast. It shifts too fast. But if you take your time and you do extra writing, you'll actually find that you can find a way to organically bring that together. And it might require you to do extra writing and cut out a lot of things, right? It might require that you write a lot and then you go back and you cut out a lot of the extra stuff so you can have that clear way, that clear path to the end. Or it might give you a better way to get to the end if you're doing that as well. But that's what I do as well. So when I write, I try to take this attitude that it's not going to be one day when I finish it. It's not going to be a year that I finish it. I try to have this attitude of patience because this attitude of patience allows me to sit down and get written what I need written. Okay. So the main idea of this episode is that when you write your plot, it should make sense from one plot point to the other. And you're only going to be certain whether that flow of your story makes sense from one plot point to the other if you actually think about each plot point and you think about what's going to come next. And you not only think about what is going to come next, but you think about the possibilities of what could come next as well. So what do you think about this? Do you have other ideas for how you plot your book or how you make things come together in a way that is organic? I know there are pitfalls to using a outline and it can be very rigid, so I'd love to hear your ideas on that as well. You can, if you're watching this on a video format, you can tell me in the comments, or you can always connect to me on social media if you're not. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.